Welcome to the Gîte Podcast, the show that takes you behind the scenes at a Gîte. Each episode, we share real stories, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. For this podcast, I went to Maison Montruf, a beautiful Gîte in the Dordogne. And we discussed so many facets of running a Gîte that I've actually split the podcast into two parts. And in this first part, we talk about how Paul and Charlotte, the owners, move out of their own home during the summer and allow paying guests in, and where they go to stay while they've got paying guests. We then took a step back and talked about why they moved to France originally and what role a Gîte business had in the plans they had to move here. We also discussed how their year looks, so what they do pre the season, during the season, and after the season, which I think is really interesting. And they were very honest about what revenue they achieve and how important it is for them to build relationships with their guests. Now, at this point, I got slightly anxious because we got into a discussion where I thought perhaps that their incredible hospitality actually impacted their revenue. So I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Gîte Podcast. Brought to you by Gîte Guru.
For our very first Gîte podcast, we thought it was a brilliant idea to talk with our first ever clients back in 2020. And thank you very much, Paul and Charlotte, for welcoming us into your home, which also happens to be your Gîte.
Yes, and welcome back to Maison Montruf, Rupert.
Thank you.
Lovely to
Great
have you
to be
both
here.
back.
So tell us a bit about your setup. This is your home and also your Gîte.
It's our home for 8 months of the year, 7 months of the year, and then we move out and it becomes a Gîte.
And where do you move to?
A small chalet in the garden. So we go from 350 square metres to 32.
32 square metres with you two and your two
And
quite large dogs.
Quite large dogs, quite large, quite hairy dogs.
And so you live there for 17 weeks or do you go in there earlier?
No, we have to move out of the house about 5 weeks before guests arrive.
Yeah.
It takes that long to deep clean with all the walls, with stone walls, and us moving all of our stuff out. It's a cross between a home and a Gîte. So it's better, it's not better equipped, it's more equipped than a standard Gîte because we can't actually move all of our stuff out. We don't have room. So it just takes a long time.
So you move out for 5 weeks before the guests arrive, 17 weeks when the guests are here, and are you straight back in the day after the guests leave?
What we'd normally do is we think about what needs doing at the end of the season. Maintenance-wise or, improvements. And we may stay in the chalet whilst we do those because it's easier to work on the house when you're not living in it. You can just finish what you're doing and then just walk out back over to the chalet. And then we just, do that until we think, right, okay, time to move back in. The house then goes back into being a store. So the room we're sat in at the moment is, in the winter, is full of all of our pool equipment, all of our, tables and chairs from outside. So, we actually only use, sort of one floor of the house during the winter and the utility room, and that's about it.
Because it is a really large house. You said 350 square metres. There are 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms.
5 bathrooms.
2 sitting rooms.
Yes. Large kitchen.
And various other funny attic rooms and billiard room.
Billiard room behind you, yes.
And a washing room. So it is really big, yeah. And was that part of the reason why you decided to rent it out as a Gîte? Because you had bought, as a couple, as only the two of you, you'd bought a massive place and you were rolling about in it and knocking about in it.
Yes. The original idea was completely different. Our original idea was 2 small houses, one that we could live in and one that we could rent out as a Gîte.
So you were always planning on running a Gîte and earning some extra income doing that.
Yes.
When you moved to France. And you moved from the UK.
Yeah.
We did.
So you were planning on 2 houses. What happened?
We saw this place. And we fell head over heels in love with it.
Yeah.
We did try to talk ourselves out of it after the emotion of sort of like seeing it and falling in love. We then tried to do the head
It was
because it was over budget. It was too big. It wasn't what we were looking for. We then had arranged lunch in the local village on the same day as we were due a second viewing, and we brought the people who were going to lunch with to look at it as well. And they just said, "You've got to buy it. It's absolutely stunning."
And what was it about it that captured you?
Oh, it's two things, really. The kitchen. When you walk into the kitchen, it just, wow. And also the view across the valley. You get out the car and you just look at it and you go, wow.
It is a stunning situation. And you can even see the Roc Saint-Christophe from here, which is a troglodyte you probably can explain better than I can.
It's the largest troglodyte centre in Europe.
Yeah, apparently there were people living in there until 1970. It really does go back
27,000 years, I think, were the originals.
Yeah. There's lots of history in this, ancient history in this area.
It is a stunning view. You're quite high up a hill, aren't you? And you've then can see going down into the valley and then back up again. And in the mornings, there's amazing mists rising from there. Because which river is it down there?
It's the Vézère.
It's the Vézère, okay. Yep. Yeah, it was absolutely stunning. So you fell desperately head over heels in love with this place and thought, it's over budget, it's not what we're looking for, but we're going to go for it anyway. And did you at that point decide we're going to create something in the garden, a chalet or something?
There was an outbuilding in the garden that was a very small chalet. It was actually only 20 square meters. And apparently that was where the previous owner lived when they were having the house renovated. It was either she lived there or workmen lived there. I don't know the exact story. But we saw that we could extend that and take it out to 30 square meters. So we put another room onto it, the bedroom. And then we thought, right, okay, that would work. And then really, I suppose we were thinking that we would just put it on with OTAs.
So that's online travel agents.
Yes, online travel agents.
Platforms that take bookings on your behalf, take payments on your behalf.
We would rent it out that way. That was what we were thinking. If we're totally honest, we were very naive about the business side of running a gîte when we moved down there.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing, or a bit of both?
It was obviously good in as much as we didn't know what we didn't know. And so therefore there was nothing stopping us from being foolhardy. But then, as we worked out, we would have not made as much money as we do today, and we would have made a lot of mistakes that would have cost us money.
So being foolhardy is good. Having the gumption to just go for it. Because you were living in England, and were you still working, or what was your situation?
Yeah, we were both working 9 to 5. I was in IT.
And I worked in Formula One.
Behind the steering wheel?
Sadly not. I don't think my posterior is small enough to get into one of the cars.
It was one of those things after coming on holiday to this area. It sort of became a bit of a pipe dream for us to move down here and, have an income from a Gîte business. I think all of our friends in the UK sort of thought, yeah, they'll never do that. And then, we came back from a trip and said, right, we've bought a house.
They were all rather shocked.
Yes.
Because you have got children in the UK as well, grown-up children.
Yes.
So it's not like Frank and I who don't have kids and can just have no responsibility.
Yeah, we always called it our 2020 plan. And the reason 2020 was that was when our youngest child was going to finish university.
Yeah.
And we thought, right, they're all now through their part of...
Let's escape before they come back.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, no. They were sort of like through the point where they no longer needed us, as it were.
So it was the right moment for you to have an adventure.
The only problem is we found the house a few years earlier than...
Because when did you buy then? Which year did you buy?
December 2017.
17, okay. And we met in
December.
2020. So what have you been doing up until that point? Did you move out straight away as soon as you bought it?
No, I moved out with the dogs because Paul was still working. I moved out in May 2018. We started constructing the swimming pool because the area that we have now that is a terrace and a swimming pool was an overgrown orchard. So I came out with 2 dogs.
Yeah,
and then I think you moved out in November 2018. And we then had to build the chalet, learn how to do all these things first, because we were both desk jockeys, so we didn't know how to build things.
So your first season welcoming guests was 2021.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and that was sort of like we got hit by COVID on that one. So we originally had sort of like quite a lot of bookings from the UK.
Yeah.
And then they all cancelled. And we then ended up with French, German, Belgium's guests from that year. And mainly they were all Airbnb, weren't they? And VRBO.
And was it a good year then, or was it really?
We only did about 7 weeks that year.
So less than you were hoping to do.
Less than we were hoping.
If COVID hadn't have happened.
Yeah.
And how did that was a real kind of unforeseen circumstance.
It was quite nice, because I think we underestimated quite how much work the season would be. And for our first year, I think it was probably as much as we could have coped with, because we didn't know what we were doing, really.
And then in year 2, you had a season that it wasn't 17 weeks, was it?
No.
14?
14.
Something
13
like that?
or 14.
Yeah, we went up to sort of 14.
And then each year you've added a week or so, and you're now up to 17. And are you fully booked?
We're actually overbooked this year.
What does that mean?
We're actually overbooked. We were selling 16 weeks.
Yeah.
Was what we were selling. We've actually sold 17. So yes, we're 100% full.
You haven't double booked, you've overbooked.
Overbooked, yeah.
We've extended our season for
Fantastic.
for the last client who's booked for the last week said they were coming from America and China, but they really wanted 2 weeks. But because we'd only advertised 16 weeks, we said, well, okay, we'll extend, we'll keep it open for another week.
So fully booked, it's not bad at all. Okay, you do have a limited season, but it's still 17 weeks is probably the average in the Dordogne, I would say, for Gîte. So it's not limited in the sense of it's not very many. It's limited because you've decided when the start and end date is. But that's pretty good. And how's next year looking?
We're about 50% booked for next year, aren't we?
And how many of those are returning guests, would you say? Or this year, how many are returning
We're
guests?
about 50 of the weeks, 50% of them are taken up by returning guests. Yeah. So we've had sort of, which was lower than the previous year. So we've had sort of quite a guest refresh this year, which we think is actually nice, because I always worry about how do you wow someone a second time
or a third time
or a third time,
or a fourth time.
But obviously those people that come back obviously love the place, and that's why they come back. But so we've got quite a lot of new guests this year. We got a lot of 1 weekers.
Quite a few word of mouth.
Good. Well. Yeah. That's pretty incredible to have 50% returning guests in, this is which season?
Season 5.
Season 5. And then in season 4, you had more than 50%. I mean, that's pretty quick going, because of course you need a lot of people to come here in order to get your returning guest average up.
Yes.
So you've done pretty well.
Yeah.
We're pleased.
To be quite honest, we're absolutely shocked. We are absolutely shocked at how, I don't know that successful is the right word, but we got the product right that people want to return.
Yeah. And what is it that they all talk about in their reviews, or when they talk to you about why they love this place, when they want to come back?
I think it's space, because it is a big house. We only rent out for 8, but there is plenty of space, isn't there? So you get that feeling of you can be together as your group, whatever your group is, but there's also space to be apart.
Yeah.
So, there is room to breathe as well. Everyone's not on top of one another. Location, I think, is
You're in a
real
fantastic part of the Dordogne, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got Saint-Léon, which is one of the prettiest villages in France, just 3 kilometers down the road. Got Montignac, famous for the Lascaux caves. That's sort of like 15 minutes in the car. And then, pretty much there are just loads and loads of activities here for all ages as well. So for people with young children through to, adult only groups sort of thing. So there's plenty to do.
If you're fully booked then, can I be very personal and ask you what your revenue this year is? Ballpark figure.
Ballpark figure, it's about 66,000.
Perfect.
Income to the house, yeah. And we do have income coming from the UK as well, because we've still got a house in the UK.
When we first moved here, we had a meeting with our accountant, and he said, so you've told me about your Gîte. What else are you going to do to earn money? And we sat there and went, we don't know. And he said, you're never going to make it on just a Gîte. And I think on the whole, that is probably quite true. I mean, 66 is, you could probably live off that a year.
Yes.
It would be tight. If you didn't have a mortgage, you could probably live off that.
Yeah, and that is,
that's the intention.
Yeah.
Well, if there is any extra, we plough it back into the house with improvements and maintenance and.
Yeah. I mean, I say we weren't sort of like very well prepared for the business. The one thing we did prepare for, because this was something we were planning to do, we did financially plan well.
Yep.
And when we were on holiday here, we saw or met people who had properties with mortgages and how much pressure they were under.
Yep.
You know, it is a massive pressure. So we made the decision that we would want to do this without a mortgage.
Yep.
Our income now is probably about a third of what we were earning in the UK.
Yep.
And this was never about money.
Yep.
You know, if we wanted money, we would have stayed in the UK doing our jobs.
So, and how has your quality of life changed then? If you look at what your professional lives now compared to what they were.
It's just night and day.
Really?
We've relaxed into a much more unstressed lifestyle. Actually, the quality of life we have here is amazing. We used to have to go to the gym or whatever for exercise. We've got a big enough garden that we no longer need a gym to keep ourselves physically active.
No commuting.
No commuting.
Apart from maybe, you know, the height of summer, very few crowds. The silence just blows me away here. You know, that you can.
We're right on the edge of thousands of acres or hectares of woods.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
And do you miss office politics? Team meetings?
Not at
Do you have
all.
team meetings still with the two of you?
No.
Oh, Frank and I have an annual general meeting every year. Yeah, we go to the pub and sit there for hours talking about what we could do better or different. Or
oh no, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
Without the beers, sadly.
Yeah, that is the normal. You are always thinking about the house. What can you do to improve?
Yeah.
What are the things you're worried about, or etc. You know?
Because you mentioned not having as much stress, but do you have stress running a Gîte? Are there, and what moments are those? Because you're fully booked, so from a marketing point of view, you're not stressed about the marketing nor the income because that's covered.
There's always the stress that people aren't going to enjoy the house.
Even after 4 completed seasons, where has anyone not enjoyed the house?
Everyone has left us 5-star reviews, but I think that if you stop caring enough about it, that's when you should get out. If you don't care enough that people are going to enjoy their holiday, then you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
And then there's the other sort of like real-time stresses, the things like the security cover on the pool broke. That was last year, wasn't it? Yeah. And so the pool couldn't be closed or opened.
And that was during the season?
During the season.
So they only had half a pool to use?
No, luckily it actually broke open.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Which was a blessing in one way, but obviously you couldn't shut it.
But also the security cover, so it's, thankfully our guests were very very understanding. Yeah. So we rushed it because it happened on a Friday evening.
Always.
So we rushed out and bought a pool alarm.
Yep. So it was still safe. And how often do you have moments like that where something breaks in the middle of a season or something goes wrong, or how often is it that you just look at each other and go,
Yeah, I think
every week.
No. I think there's probably one event a season.
Well, that's a big event, but do you not have little ones during?
All the time. all the time. But they don't. They're things
Things
that
you can solve.
You just yes, and that's actually some of the. I don't know. I quite enjoy problem. You know, if there is an issue, for example, we were out. Sorry, we were and we came back and our electric gates didn't work. So we thought, must have been a power cut. So we managed to get in. Thankfully, the guests turned up just after us, and there was no electricity. And it wasn't that there was a power cut in the area. A mouse had chewed through our mains and electricity coming in and had fried itself, started a small fire in the electrical box, which thankfully was outside.
The two big problems you've had so far are both electrical.
We did have bees, didn't we? We had bees nesting in the walls.
Yep.
But luckily we got to those quick enough and managed to stop them coming into the house. Yeah. They were still in the wall for a while, but at least they weren't coming in.
And what about water? Because that's the one thing, everything that goes wrong at our place is to do with water. Rainwater, mains water.
Water, we've been out.
That's another stress. I hadn't even thought of that one.
No, I mean, on the whole, water's been okay, hasn't it? You're forever fixing toilets or decalking them. The water here
is so hard.
Very, very hard.
And have you found that a problem then in the running, not just aesthetically having, calcium or lime scale in the bowl of your loo, but do you find that it affects your kettles and
yes, absolutely
coffee machines and things like that?
Yeah. The this season it's a new kettle, isn't it? Because the old one's just looking not as good because of the calcium.
It's not pouring.
Yeah, and with the toilets, what we'll do is we'll put vinegar in the ones that we're not using over the winter and things like that to sort of like try and break the calcium down. And then we just, check them all before we open sort of thing. But yeah, they will go wrong.
And we always had that it wasn't just in the bowl of the loo, it was the actual mechanics in the cistern would always get clogged up.
He takes them out and I decalc them.
We've now put in a water softening system that cost an absolute fortune, but we had several hot water tanks that just went after 7 years. And started leaking everywhere, and we just couldn't take the risk anymore.
Well, we've actually got a water softener that comes to the house, and the water's still hard.
Really?
So we use it. For the guests, our kettles will fur up. So you get a slight scum on them within a week. And so we provide one of those water filters. So specifically for the kettle.
So coming back to it, not a lot of stress. There are moments when things go wrong and you have to solve them. Because there's being stressful and there's being busy. How busy are you running this place?
When we finish the season, we look to see what works need to be done over the winter. We then will work on those projects. I'm trying to think what we did this year. We didn't do much this year because Charlotte had a back operation, but like for the previous year, we had the drive redone. Now, we didn't have to actually do that ourselves, but there's
always outbuildings that need rubbing down and recoating.
There's the winter jobs. There's also the time to relax over the winter as well. And then coming into spring again, picking up just works that need to be done. That could be tables that needs sanding down and varnishing or
getting
oiling.
The garden under control.
Yeah, I think that's the big. We've got a lot of oak trees, so we spend a huge amount of time raking up leaves, and we compost everything. So that actually it takes quite a lot, and to turn it over and to dig it out and to put it back in again, because we have a potager, a little kind of kitchen garden that we give to the clients. So it's all of it goes on there, so we don't have to buy any compost or anything like that. But it's just a lot of work. Just to mow the lawns, which in the spring and the autumn need twice a week. They take about 6 hours.
When we then get into the season, we then get into the weekly rhythm.
Yeah.
So you've obviously got your changeover day, which is, all hands on pump sort of thing. Us and our cleaners, we go through the house. Everything gets hoovered, cleaned. Sunday is then normally admin day, isn't it? Sort of writing to the next clients, writing to those that have just left, doing tourist tax and things like that, just making sure we're on top of that. Then Monday's normally a rest day, isn't it? And then Tuesday's laundry day. So we go take everything off to the laundry. Then the week is our own really till Friday, when we're then getting prepped doing all the preparation for the next changeover.
Yeah.
So yes, we do get a lot of time to relax in the summer.
So it's not too full on. Changeover day is full on, but the rest of the time is you do stuff, but it's not like 9 to 5 every day.
No.
Although when we do ask our guests if they're going to be going out for a couple of hours, please let us know so we can come and mow lawns and do a bit of guerrilla gardening and weeding whilst they're out.
Do you still get up very, very early in the morning to do
the pots? Yes.
Yes.
Really?
Well, I do.
You're mad.
Yeah. So I always sort of get up about before 7 and then we'll water the pots every other day. Yeah. We have put in an automated watering system, which does all of the vegetable garden and some of the beds as well.
But why do you do this then? Why at 7 or before 7 o'clock in the morning?
So you're not disturbing guests,
Because I think from knowing you quite well now, I think that hospitality is something that is really important to the two of you.
Yes.
Going that extra mile for the guests and thinking about how to not invade their privacy. Because your chalet is, how far away is it from the main house?
50 metres, I think.
Yeah, about
so it's really quite close.
Quite close, but we planted
a laurel hedge.
Laurel hedges, so and we studiously cut or leave bits of trees so that it's actually very discreet.
If the guests don't want to see us, the most they might see us is when we go out in the car.
And what other examples have you got of things that you've decided to do in order to be as hospitable as possible?
We've added services like private chefs, etc., things like that, massage services if guests want it. I think one of the things we have found very effective is we always set up a WhatsApp group with clients around about sort of the 12-week mark. When they make their second payment, we then encourage them to set up a WhatsApp group and then communicate to them, share information with them prior to them arriving so that they feel...
There's quite a lot of work for you, though.
It is.
And having to remember what you've said to whom and...
Yes, effectively building up their excitement for their holiday. We were always quite upset if a customer, we say, do you want to set up a WhatsApp group? And they say no.
But in this day and age of Booking.com, a lot of people going on holiday book a place and don't think about building that relationship with the owners. It's all quite anonymous or...
Well, it was interesting. One of the ones that we had last year, they're very reticent. The lead guest never really gave us any information about any of the other people, which was fine. So we thought, well, this is going to be quite a quiet week. There's not going to be much interaction. But when they arrived, he was thrilled and was very communicative. And it turned out that he said, until I arrived here and came in the gates and met you, he said, I wasn't entirely sure that the whole thing wasn't... You can never be 100% sure that it wasn't a scam.
It's like an old wives' tale, isn't it? I'm sure it has happened before, but so infrequently that... But by the time people who you haven't met before arrive here, they must greet you like old friends because you've had all this contact beforehand.
Yeah.
We've just recently decided to have instant booking on our website, and we have now taken a booking for October from somebody I have no idea who it is. I can see some information about where she lives in America from her credit card details, but otherwise I know nothing. It's really interesting. I know how many people are in the group, but not their ages or where they're from, or it's the first time that we've had that kind of anonymity.
We certainly felt that in that first year, the COVID year, when everything was coming to us via VRBO or Airbnb, that yes, we didn't know who the clients were, whereas now all of our bookings are direct.
Yeah.
And so we've had communication with the guests as part of the booking process and then the ongoing process. So yes, that is much nicer, knowing who is going to be arriving and what the group size is.
Talking about things you don't appreciate that your guests are thinking. We had on the opposite end of the scale a returning guest, and she got out of the car and she burst into tears. And she said, it's just like, I've come home. It's just wonderful. And she said, and the great thing about coming back again is you gain another day and a day and a half's holiday because you don't have to learn the house. And
exactly. You can go straight back in.
Which is great.
And another thing I think you do to be ultra hospitable is if people want to rebook, if a returning guest want to come back next year, you don't charge them immediately, do you?
No. Our policy is we We won't take any money until about February of the year that they're coming. That's when we take if they're returning guests. Yeah. And we now, for returning guests, they get the previous year's price.
Why?
Because we don't do this for the money.
Anyone thinking of starting out a Gîte, it should be about the money and everything else that goes with it. But you also have 5 bedrooms, but you only accept 8 guests. And again, that could be a very easy way of charging and earning more money, is by actually taking it up to 10. You've got the space in the bedrooms for 10 people.
The house is really sort of like equipped for 8 around the tables and the common spaces, and that we found that we were getting multi-generational families, and poor old granny would have to end up in a single bed because of the way we had the house configured. So we then decided we'd open up the 5th bedroom, put a king-size room in there, and it does give families or groups a lot more flexibility about how they can sleep, sort of thing. So
also the kitchen table, you can fit 10 people around it, not as comfortably as 8. One of the things it's spacious, that we want the house to feel spacious. Sitting cheek by jowl when you're eating doesn't feel spacious.
It puzzles me so much because I look at your setup and you sacrifice your own house for a large part of, the best part of the year, because it's the summer. You go and live with your 2 enormous dogs in a chalet of 32 square meters, and yet you're not doing it to squeeze every penny out of the business. You're doing it to ensure that there is ultimate comfort for the guests, that you're not squeezing them around the table, that you're offering more bedrooms than really you need in order for them to have flexibility. Oh, it just goes against the grain. You're allowing returning guests to pay what they paid the previous year instead of charging them the rate, which includes the inflation. So in fact, you're almost giving them a discount.
Yeah.
You're a brilliant example of how to do it the way that works for you, rather than to do it the way I would tell you to do it or advise you to do it.
Yes, but we would not be in the position we are now if we hadn't come and seen you first. We would have made so many mistakes. We never would have been in a situation where we could afford, not necessarily financially afford, but as a thing, afford to be so generous about it.
Welcome to the Gîte Podcast. Brought to you by Gîte Guru.
I found that a really interesting discussion. One of the things I love is just how diverse running a Gîte is, because you've got Paul and Charlotte on one end who move out of their own home to accept paying guests in the summer. The other end of the spectrum, you've got what Frank and I do, where we never rent out our own home, which is where I'm sitting now, but we have 2 houses on our property that we do rent out, that we never live in. And I think in the middle, you've got people with second homes in France who rent them out when they're not using them. So I love the fact that we're all so diverse and we do it in slightly different ways. And I also love the fact that even though I know Paul and Charlotte for 5 years now and they have become friends, they still surprise me with their take on running a Gîte business. And I think that's a fantastic thing. They pour their heart and soul into their business. They really do. And the amount of maintenance they do on their property is absolutely fantastic. But I found it very interesting that they said that they weren't doing it for the money. So their objective is not necessarily financial. Of course, they're doing it to earn money, but their end goal is not financial. Their end goal is to ensure that they have really happy guests. And I've been thinking about this, and I think that probably comes from them having a limited season, because all of us want really happy guests, of course, but they are pretty certain that they're going to fill their season, while for other Gîtes like ours, we have an unlimited season, so we have the challenge of trying to extend the season as much as possible. And therefore, that is our end goal, I think, a financial one, extending our season with very happy guests. So it's really interesting to see that, but the way they do it really works. And I am very pleased how they are aware of exactly what the rules and regulations are around how they rent out their Gîte, that they are limited to the number of nights that they can rent out because it's their primary residence. But as you saw towards the end, I did get a little bit anxious when we talked about returning guests. Now, returning guests are brilliant. They are brilliant because they have already experienced your product, been in your location, experienced the services that you offer, and they've met you. And they like it all enough to want to come back. And you have also experienced them as guests staying in your property. And you like them enough that you also want them to return. So it's a win-win for both parties. And for that reason, I do think that returning guests deserve our love and our loyalty. And there are lots of ways we can show that, which Paul and Charlotte discuss. But there was one of them I don't actually agree with, and that is Paul and Charlotte offer guests the opportunity to book for next year at this year's prices. That means they're ignoring inflation and, in effect, giving a discount. And inflation in France for the past couple of years has been 5%, which is a lot of money. The bills you'll be getting next year to pay will all be corrected by inflation. So your rates should be too. That's what I honestly think. And returning guests will often take the best weeks of the year. They'll want to be coming back for regular weeks in the summer holidays. So you really shouldn't be discounting those ones. But as I said, for Paul and Charlotte, it is all about offering the best experience they can to their guests, and they feel that that is part of it. So I hope you found it as interesting as I do, and watch out for the second part of this podcast coming soon. If you haven't met us before, we're Gîte Guru, Frank and me, Rupert. We run our own gîtes, Le Mas and Le Mazette, and when we left our careers in Amsterdam back in 2015 to run these gîtes full-time, they became our livelihood. We had to make the business work. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but through trial, error, and plenty of learning, we've built a 32-week season and a loyal base of 60% returning guests. We started Gîte Guru to share what we've learned and to help others succeed too. So if you're looking for free tips, insights, and inspiration, head to gîteguru.com and subscribe to this Gîte podcast. For ongoing updates, behind-the-scenes posts, and relevant Gîte news, including tax changes and industry trends, follow us on Instagram at gite.guru. And if you're after more personalized support, we offer tailor-made advice around your business, your gîte, its interiors, facilities, the services you offer, and the all-important communication and marketing. So telling the story of your gîte and making it visible to your target groups. If you're interested, get in touch for a free Zoom chat about your property, your plans, and how we could help you. And don't forget, follow us on Instagram at gite.guru. See you there.